Hello and welcome to yet another special edition of In Depth on Rajya Sabha Television. Today we shall focus on issues that impacted general elections since long back. Their dynamism continues to play an important role in guiding the destiny of the nation in some way or the other. These issues also symbolize the hopes and aspirations of the electorate. Their legacy defines both the history and the growth narrative of a nation as it moves along.
India's story starts 4 years after it got independence. It writes on the constitution that was created in 1950. It sets social, economic objectives for a nascent country. The development was seen from the ideological and political lens of various political outfits. Their articulation reflected in their manifestos that connect the basic policy and objectives involving governance. Some of the manifestos cobbled by the political parties in early 50s are Socialist Party programs, October 1947, Congress Report of Economic Program Committee, January 1948, CPI Draft Program in October 1951, All India Scheduled Caste Federation Draft Manifesto in October 1951, Jan Sangh Manifesto in October 1951, Swatantra Party Details of Principles in August 1959. But why, after all, India needed urgent reforms? Simply because post-British rule, half the population was below the poverty line. 88% of the population was illiterate. In 1947, the average life expectancy was 32 years. The economic growth between 1757 to 1947 was disappointing. UK's GDP between 1757 to 1947 increased to 347%. India's GDP stagnated around 14%. The country and its leadership had no option except to bite the bullet. Thus, the national reconstruction emerged as one of the key issues in the first general election. Its glimpse could be found in all political documents of that period. The elections were held and Congress came to power with 364 seats and 45% vote share. It prioritized and planned development of the public sector. The idea was to lay base for industrialization and job creation in New India. The public sector was chosen as fulcrum of the new economic plan and policy. For your information, there were just 5 public sector entities in India post-independence purely due to the apathy of the colonial masters. They had no intent or say in the economic growth of the country they ruled. The few units which existed were defense production. The idea was to keep the defense matters information under wraps. Railways, to ensure large-scale transportation of products and minerals. Post and telegraph, due to its strategic importance. The then regime under the then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru prioritized PSUs that produced goods and commodity. During this period, the investment in the public sector was mere 4 crore rupees. But the fast-track growth soon yielded results. The PSUs were given primacy in 5-year plans. In 1951, the government's investment during first 5-year plan spiked to 29 crore rupees. These investments increased to 3,93,057 crore rupees. About 42% of the total tax revenue generated by the PSEs. The advent of the public sector enterprises accrued several benefits. Benefits from public sector enterprises. Rapid economic development. Due to high risk and low returns, public sector enterprises were needed to develop major industries. In the first phase of growth, the infra-sector enterprises like financial institutions and telecom and banking were executed through the public sector. Only government could develop high industries due to its access to huge economic resources. PSEs ensured welfare schemes, suitable pricing policy for small industries, and reduction of inequalities through the supply of cheap goods to the consumer. Private sector generally ignores backward areas which lack basic infra and amenities like electricity, roads, telecommunications, skilled labours, etc. PSEs set up large projects in these areas and bring in investments to develop such areas. In this way, PSEs help in achieving balanced regional growth. Generating employment opportunities is a key objective of the public sector enterprises. This sector has provided direct employment to more than 80% labour of the organised sector. During the early stage of development, India was low on foreign exchange. It was drained further due to the import of machinery and capital goods. PSEs were tasked to produce goods that could save the precious foreign currency and facilitate exports. PSEs have the capacity to mobilize funds through the large network of banking and financial institutions. Public sector profits, too, are ploughed back in the development of the country. The PSEs contribute to the government's treasury through taxes and dividend. Recognizing the role and importance of the PSEs in the development of the country, the government in July 1997 bestowed the title of Navratnas to the best of them. BHEL, BPCL, GAIL, HPCL, IOC, MTNL, NTPC, ONGC and SAIL. Freedom of capital investment. Freedom to enter into joint ventures. Mobilization of capital from global domestic markets. In October 1997, the government also identified 45 Mini Ratna, granted autonomy and delegated financial power to them. As per Public Enterprises Survey in 2017-18, at present, there are 339 central public sector enterprises in the country, out of which 257 are operational and 82 under construction. Besides, about 1,000 state public enterprises with 4 to 5 lakh crore rupees investment. Today, public sector's contribution in electricity distribution, telecommunication and transportation is around 50%. In basic metals, fuel and fertilizer sector, it is 80 to 100%. They provide basic infra for industrialization and economic growth. Today, our public sector accounts for about 27% of the total industrial production. In 2018, the public sector contributed 3.5 lakh crore rupees to the state exchequer. The 50s decade symbolizes the hopes and aspiration of every Indian as to how he or she perceives the country, free India, and what all should be its sterling qualities. But the prime objective was a stable and strong India. There were demands of restricting the country, especially on linguistic lines. It also became a strong electoral issue. Keeping these sentiments in mind, the Constituent Assembly in November 1947 appointed a commission under Allahabad High Court Judge S.K. Dhar. This commission submitted its report in 1948. The report advised not to create states on the basis of language only. The commission suggested appending following criteria along with the languages: geographic reference, financial autonomy, administrative viability, and growth possibilities. Earlier, Congress appointed a 3-member committee to consider the recommendations of the Dhar Commission in its Jaipur session in 1948. The committee is popularly known as JVP Committee after its 3 members, Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, and Patabhi Sitaramaiah. The committee rejected the language on the basis of the reorganization of the states. It suggested that the security, unity, and economic prosperity of the nation be the criteria of the reorganization. The Congress Working Committee accepted its recommendations in 1949, but demand for linguistic restructuring of the states continued in the southern states, especially in Telugu-speaking areas. The movement took a violent turn with Sriramulu's suicide. Eventually, Congress accepted the restructuring of Telugu-speaking area in the state of Andhra Pradesh in 1953.
On December 22, 1953, Jawaharlal Nehru appointed a commission under Justice Fazal Ali to consider these new demands. The commission submitted its report in 1955 and suggested that the entire country be divided into 16 states and 3 union territories. While not fully agreeing with the recommendations, the country was divided into 14 states and 6 union territories under the Reorganization Act and State Reorganization Act passed in 1956. These states were
14 states: Andhra Pradesh, Assam, Bihar, Bombay, Jammu and Kashmir, Kerala, Madhya Pradesh, Madras, Mysore, Orissa, Punjab, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal. 6 union territories: Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Delhi, Himachal Pradesh, Lakhabad, Minicoy and Amiand Islands, Manipur and Tripura. The reasons offered for creating states on linguistic lines were: local language promotes people's participation in general public administration. Governance becomes easy in areas where language, geographic features are shared. It also helps promote local languages which are ignored during the British rule.
The demand for food security had even shriller sense of urgency than the issue of state reorganization. The problem of food security had started even before independence. The price of food grain had skyrocketed due to World War II. The famine in Bengal in 1943 aggravated it further. It is said that about 35 lakh people died of hunger. To contain the rout, the government introduced a rationing system, which 4.50 crore of citizens. But owing to the apathy and corruption, the steps taken failed to mitigate the suffering of the starving millions. But there was more to come. In 1947, the division took place. The India was saddled with 82% of the population, 69% of irrigated land and 45% of agricultural land. The country lost the Western Punjab and Sindh region that provided tons of grains. Ditto with Burma or Myanmar, which was a major rice provider, forcing the country to import both rice and wheat.
At the time of independence, the country faced many problems. Due to lack of food security systems, there was danger of famine and starvation, and due to low intake of food and low consumption of food, the spectre of malnutrition was haunting the population. It was mainly due to poverty and lack of purchasing power among the poor regions. Owing to this scenario, agriculture was given top priority in the first 5-year plan. During the first plan period, there was a significant improvement in the situation of food and yield in the country. Food grain imports declined and their prices contracted by 23%. But this was due to better climate situation and monsoon arrival at the right time. In the year 1958-59, many parts of the country faced serious food crisis due to drought, cyclone and flood. This was during second plan. To deal with the crisis, the Indian government signed an agreement with the USA to import 3.1 million tons of wheat and 0.19 million tons of rice in 1956. This agreement was known as Public Law 480 Agreement 1956. The purpose of this agreement was to reduce and stabilize food prices in the country. Herein lay the seeds of public distribution system. It was primarily created to distribute cheap imported food grains through a network of fair price shops. In the third plan, the target was to increase the production of food grain to 100 million tons, but the plan failed to achieve the target. In such a situation, the government had no other choice but once again to rely on imported food grains. India imported 6 lakh tons between 1955 to 56, 1.4 million tons between 1956 to 57. 36 million tons between 1956 to 57, 63 lakh tons between 1963 to 64, 74 lakh tons between 1964 to 65, and 310 million tons between 1965 to 66. inadequate growth in the production of food grains. Before the Green Revolution, the production of food grains in India was abysmally low. After the new agricultural strategy, production of food grains touched 233.9 million tons in 2008 and 2009. But considering the high rate of population growth, the rate of increase in food production still needs a push. High rate of population growth. India's population has grown at a very high rate post-independence. Though during the decades of 1961 and 71 and 1971 to 81, the annual average growth rate of population in India decreased slightly from 2.5% and then to 1.9% in 1991 to 2001. Thus, the growing population contributes in food shortage problem in the country. Increasing trend of consumption. According to the 2011 census, nearly 22% of India's population is still below the poverty line. Due to this, the demand for food grains from the marginal quarters remain high. And with the increase in the average income of the other side, the demand for the food grain too increases rapidly, causing huge pressure in the food market. The trend of hoarding is common in India. Traders compete to make profits by hoarding food grains. Thus, hoarding too causes artificial crisis in the country. There is a production-consumption mismatch when it comes to the farm sector, which has seen spike in consumption in the recent years. So now, lesser cereal find its way to the mandis. Administrative issues. In order to improve the food situation in the country, the government took several measures like price control, rationing, zoning, surprise check, etc. But due to administrative shortcomings, these measures fail to meet their objectives. The government has taken several measures to stabilize the food security scenario over the past many years. Food safety and policies. Technical steps. To overcome food crisis, the government adopted technical measures to boost farm production. Since 60s, the government adopted new agricultural strategy while promoting high-quality seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, etc. It also promoted farm mechanization through tractors, oil engines, pump sets, tube wells, thrashers, harvester combines. All these measures were taken under the ambit of Green Revolution. To increase agricultural productivity, the government initiated various land reforms pertaining to sealing, land rent regulation, tenants' ownership, etc. But owing to half-baked approach of the state governments, land reforms failed to heal the farm stress. To stabilize food prices and to facilitate delivery, the government adopted zoning system where the country was divided into food deficit areas and food surplus areas. This system restricted the private initiatives in this sector while promoting the public distribution system. Again, due to many shortcomings, this system was finally terminated. To ensure regularity and certainty in food supply across the country, the government advocated the creation of buffer stocks of 5 million tons of food grains up to 1973-74. Earlier, in January 1965, the Food Corporation of India was established to procure, handle, transport, store and distribute food grains by the government. To supply food grains through the public distribution system, the FCI is allowed to undertake procurement operations in various states at large scale. Presently, from January 1992, the plan to use PDS has been started in nearly 1,700 blocks falling in dry terrain, deserts, integrated tribal development project areas and some hill areas. In these areas, additional items such as tea, soap, pulses and iodized salt are part of the PDS inventory, but there are flaws in the system which are addressed at the regular intervals. Now let's talk of growing participation of women in the general elections. These trends also indicate the churning and changes in the society over the decades. It also constitutes a slow but a societal change which we have witnessed with every passing general election. A recent report has revealed that an ever-increasing number of women and their political assertiveness will play a big role in the forthcoming elections. As per the Election Commission figures, the number of women voters have increased from 47% to 48.13% in 2019 polls. As per the Election Commission Registrar, the women registered are more than half the number of voters of the total 4.35 crore registrations. 2014 general elections also saw the highest women turnout, which was 65.63%. As per the Election Commission statistics, an increase of 22% was recorded in women voters between 2009 and 2014 general elections. To promote the participation of women voters, the Commission has initiated measures like systematic voter education and electoral participation program in 2014 elections. These measures produced favorable results. In order to target rural women, the Election Commission organized Rangoli and folk art competitions and interacted through Anganwadi and Asha workers. There are about 60 crore women in India, which is 9% of the global population. They are a force to reckon with. When we see them swelling the line of voters in the country, we realize how important women vote can be at any election, national or state level. Women are changing their perception about themselves. They are more aware of their rights and want to exercise their right to vote. They want system to pay heed to their demands and ensure jobs. They firmly believe that the best way out to be heard is to get out and vote. For your information, there are about 8 crore young adults who will get right to vote in 2019, but half of them will be young women. And 73% of these young voters live in the villages of India.
The roots of electoral participation of women in India lie in the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, which happened between 1905 and 1908. This movement promoted participation of Indian women in nationalist activities, and the question of women franchise too got noticed. The first formal demand of the franchise arose in Madras in 1917, when Women's Indian Association demanded a comprehensive role for women in the public life. After this, the women's suffrage movement was co-opted with the nationalist concerns in 1920s and 1930s. There was an outcome of this movement between 1920 and 1929. In different provinces of India, some women were given limited voting rights, but these rights were given to a very small class on merit. The Government of India Act of 1935 later gave franchise to a wider class of women, although still it was hostage to the factors like literacy, property, ownership or marriage to noblemen. Under the Act, a woman was given a franchise on every 5 men. It was opposed by stakeholders who want unfettered voting rights.
But despite of the opposition offered by the women's movement, the 1935 Act 41 reserved seats for women in the provincial assemblies. The women's movement was against the reservation of seats on gender basis. Some seats were reserved in the central legislature too. These reservations created rift on the sexual and religious grounds in the movement. Some years later, India got freedom and Indian women finally got what they wanted. If we refer to some old reports today, there was a gap of 16.7% votes between the female and the male voters in 1962 general elections. It decreased to 4.4% in 2009 and further fell in 2014. Now even political parties are discovering female voters with a new perspective. This year in Madhya Pradesh, some parties have specifically highlighted issues related to women's safety, better health services, education and employment to women in their manifestos. Election Commission too has started the Sangri polling booths in Chhattisgarh, which means friend in a local language. These booths will be replicated in many states this year. So today's women is definitely moving forward as a voter and as a leader with limelight firmly focused on her.
So here was the latest episode. This time our effort was to highlight some key issues that reflect the public sentiment and interest through platforms like general elections. These issues have played a huge role in structuring the contours of growth and they continue to do so in national interest. We shall be back next week with a new topic. Till then, goodbye from all of us.